what I would encourage is to build something, a resource that gives you that academic freedom. This can be anything, right? This can be just becoming very good at grant writing, for instance. That I think has been another lever for me. Just being good at getting money, getting funded, because this allows me, of course, to broaden my research perspective. I can say what I do research on, and not necessarily the position that I'm applying for. So this is a totally different logic, and I feel like many early career academics do not really think enough about this option.
So beyond publishing papers, what are those skills that you think separates researchers who are going to thrive from the people who are going to struggle, particularly in this era of AI?
Publication has become relatively easy to produce. Like I can, without much effort, someone who has no knowledge can create something that has the looks of an academic publication. While AI can help you to speed up the process of, say, writing, it can actually speed up the process of ruining your career, even more than that, right? So, I was never really focused on like external criteria of like how to become a professor or something. I was always guided by my own interests. That explains why I was hopping from field to field, which of course is not like the typical strategy that you would hear in academia, right? Usually it's like niche down, publish in like one very, very tiny domain and then go for quantity basically. And I kind of did the opposite of that.
Welcome to the Truth in Research conversation, and this is one that is designed to help early career researchers who actually want insights that are quite very important in shaping the development of their careers. We want to be that bridge, bringing experts, people who have the understanding of several specialized fields, sharing ideas that can really be very helpful generally. So today on this show we have somebody who is very powerful. Professor Dominic Froelich, if I actually pronounce that very well.
Well pronounced.
Yes. So he's a full professor of methods of work psychology. Prof, I want you to start by introducing yourself. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for a nice welcome. I think for me talking here today, there are basically two things that you should maybe know. The one is like the academic side, what you've already mentioned, that I'm a professor in work psychology, but actually, I think the field is of much less importance than you would think, because I have a very interdisciplinary career. So I started with computer science, then business. My doctorate was actually at the intersection of I would say business and maybe work psychology and learning. And then in the German-speaking world, we have this what is called habilitation, which comes after the dissertation. This was much more focused on education. And now I'm kind of back or starting, I don't know, in work psychology. So I have a very interdisciplinary background, and methods are indeed what kind of like research methods that is like the thread that runs through all of them. And the second thing that is important, I think, is that I also have like this meta perspective. Like I'm not only just like someone who has built the academic career in a very, I would say, self-directed manner for himself, but also I'm a certified coach and counselor working in this domain of like academic careers in general. But I really like to focus on early career scholars. Yeah.
Wonderful. I used to tell people that Vienna, Austria, is a city that is known for research and innovation. And of course, a lot of very talented things are actually really happening there. And you swear several hats. You're a professor, you're a researcher, you're an academic career coach, and you also identify as a mentor. So looking back, what was a particular moment you realized your passion? Let me just put it this way now, because I'm sure a lot of people, several times in their career, there could be something that would be the driving force to why you are where you are today. And I'm sure that passion wasn't just doing research, but helping researchers build successful careers. So what was really that driving force?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think there are like two things that I think about. One is again, it actually maps to what I've said in the introduction round. The one is that I always, I was never really focused on like external criteria of like how to become a professor or something. I was always guided by my own interests. That explains why I was hopping from field to field, which of course is not like the typical strategy that you would hear in academia, right? Usually it's like niche down, niche down, niche down, publish in like one very, very tiny domain and then go for quantity basically. And I kind of did the opposite of that, right? I'm like very broad. If you check out my publications, they're all over the place, really. It's really hard to find a thread, like a core theme in those publications. So I think that is was always the important part for me, to see how academia fits into my life and not the other way around, as I see many people try to do it. So I've always put family first, and their academia an extremely rewarding field. Even though if you check like, I don't know, LinkedIn posts or something, you often get the impression it's the opposite. But I think like academia is like totally family friendly if you do it the right way. Yeah. And the second thing, it's connected to that, is that I indeed saw that many people do not know how to actually build that in their careers, right? They start out their career and maybe they believe that mental model of publish in one direction, niche down, niche down, niche down. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, the problem really is, if you go for that niche, it can work, but it's extremely risky strategy, right? So at the end, what I noticed with many of my colleagues, they are basically standing with their backs against the wall, because they're so specific in what they're doing that they can't hardly move left or right, and they basically need to accept any position that they were offered, right? And for me, it was always like, okay, I do have the full professorship now, and I'm tenured, but that wasn't actually the goal, right? I had a teaching, like a senior lecturer position. I still have it actually at a public university, and that was the goal, to have like a 50% position in academia, so to speak, have one foot in there and do whatever I like on the side. Because that, again, is another advantage, I think, of academia, because it can be very, very flexible, right? Which is often overlooked in a way.
Yeah, because when you look at the trajectory of how PhD researchers are being instructed, one of my professors used to say, what you do in your master's, you must make sure you do it in your PhD, so that you do it in your postdoctorate, that you need to make sure you follow that same path. And the disadvantages here now is that you don't get to explore, right? You kind of narrow down your publishing. Let's say, for example, you're publishing around antimicrobial resistance, then you have a dozen of papers on antimicrobial resistance, and that is just all about antimicrobial resistance. So when it comes to having that intersection with other emerging fields, you're really more like a novice, because you've narrowed so much down. So it's kind of difficult for you to also engage in other areas. So it's always very good for people to explore, because you might not even really know where you might be really good in when you continue to maybe stay around one place. So now, but the truth here is that looking at our conversation today, now we know that artificial intelligence is really changing a lot of things, almost in academia. And I do see some of your posts that you do put out there, quite very educative. And when you look at AI, you see that it's transforming how we do literature review research. In short, I was looking up something today, and I was wondering the Prisma, the Prisma reporting items. I was kind of like, I think now a lot of artificial intelligence tools now is now substituting that human input that we do usually do put in. But then let's look at literature review in general now. When you look at literature review searching and how we write, the whole teaching and peer review process. If we fast forward 5 years from now, what do you think an academic career would look like compared to what is happening today?
Well, I actually believe it will not be, like the shift will not be as traumatic as we usually hear on social media or whatever, right? I mean, in general, what we do see, and of course, if you look at like the business sector, of course, is like always, of course, moving much faster than we are in academia. And we haven't really seen a lot of big changes that can clearly be attributed to AI at the moment, I think, right? I mean, there were like layoffs that were most likely the outcome of a pure economy and not so much of AI. And then people were quietly rehired back because they couldn't actually do it without the people, right? And I think in academia, it's pretty much the same, right? So I don't really, I use AI extensively in my workflows, but on a very operative level. So I would say my workflow is quite like AI embedded. So I'm not prompting anything really, but AI is there at every stage of the research process, but as a helper, as a conversation partner, as a brainstorming partner, essentially. And for me personally, this is the biggest win. It's actually a lifestyle change, because now I'm not like sitting in front of the computer typing all the day, but I'm really just taking a walk in nature, and with my mobile phone, I'm just connected to AI, and I'm just bounce back a few ideas, get some drafting done, etc. And I can do that while being out there in the nature, getting some steps in, and that is, for me, like really, really powerful. But it's not, it's just a convenience function, if you will. It's not really changing the essence of what I'm doing, right? Because you need to go through all the steps yourself. Because while AI can help you to speed up the process of, say, writing, it can actually speed up the process of ruining your career, even more than that, right? So if you make a misstep, and we have seen this also, like, for instance, to bring like a really harsh example now in the US warfare with bombing the school building, right, which apparently was an AI decision, right? This is something that is quite unforgivable, right? So even if it's just happening once in many decisions, this is quite problematic. Okay, so in the end, you need to supervise it quite closely, and then the efficiency also isn't the efficiency win, is not that big as it first appears when you just try your first prompt and you're amazed of how nice it sounds, but then you do it again and again and you realize, okay, actually it's not that new, right? It's just it's just repeating itself all over again. And usually for academia, I think working at a level that is not always useful. Yeah.
True.
Because it's too shallow often. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm going to just say it's more of you got people used to say artificial intelligence is just kind of revolving the answers, right? And it's just the chain revolving what's they're training their models with what we put in there, and then it's kind of revolving and making that prediction. But let's look at it from this standpoint now. And for an early career researcher, are you going to, because many of them now are asking themselves this question, whether artificial intelligence is going to replace them, but because I'm sure you supervise students, and should they be worried, or should they be learning how to work with AI instead?
So I think there is place for AI, and as I said, like I've been transparent about my own workflows. I use it. I would say I'm quite a heavy user of AI, right? But it really needs to be. You need to be very clear about the decision that you make, where you use it, for which kind of processes, and also evaluate it like quite strictly of, does it really make sense? Because sometimes it's just nice looking. It's always nice looking, to be honest, right? It's always impressive, but if you take a closer look, I think what many people also realize is that actually, with all the editing that you need to do afterwards, etc., it might actually take longer than if you would have just written it in the first place, right? So I think for junior academics, I think there's no real way around it, right? I don't think that this really is a pathway, but one needs to find a pathway where you can co-work with it, basically, and see where it does make sense to introduce it. And then what you've just mentioned also with student work, right? I mean, this is also very important. I think when you're talking about academic careers, it's just super important to realize that there's not like the academic career, and that if you just single out one individual, even that single individual will have quite an array of tasks, like doing research, doing teaching, being involved in leadership activities, or like self-service of the academic system, right? So these are all very different processes where AI can play a very different role. right? For instance, I don't really believe it is anywhere near to be in competition at the teaching end, right? That's also something that people claim, like people in the 90s have claimed that online courses will, remove teachers essentially, which they pretty much did not, right? Now with AI, of course, it's a different scale, it's a different technology, but most people who make that claim just have really no idea of what education is, I think, right? So I think it can help on the learning side, but education is something very different, and I don't really see any competition on that end. Okay.
Yeah, the truth is that with artificial intelligence, the output in terms of research we must also acknowledge that the output is really growing. When you look at a lot of people's profile, more publications, and you understand the ethics in using artificial intelligence, but then it has significantly increased the output, particularly within teams, and also increased the amount of workload, because we used to talk about artificial intelligence making it seamless, but I feel like as an individual now, if you were expected to complete maybe 2 tasks before, but now with AI they expect you to complete maybe 50 or thereabout. So but what I'm going to say right now is beyond publishing papers, because you talked about your career not really being you not really directing your career towards publishing dozens of papers every week and all of that, and that is quite striking. And I did look at your profile. You talked about how you fell in love with research, which is something everybody will want to admire. And so beyond publishing papers, what are those skills that you think separates researchers who are going to thrive from the people who are going to struggle, particularly in this era of AI?
Yeah. So I think there is one thing that AI triggered, which I think is quite essential, which I haven't commented on. And actually it might be something that is really changing the landscape in, say, 5 years. And that is that it indeed, the publication has become relatively easy to produce. Like I can, without much effort, someone who has no knowledge can create something that has the looks of an academic publication, right? So what we're currently seeing is that there are many people that actually do it like this, that really have no idea what they maybe are doing, but they're producing papers on scale and feed it into the review system, which of course is being overloaded and is currently kind of at a breaking point, or actually I think beyond it, to be honest. And that is an interesting thing, because I think AI certainly helped to expose some weaknesses of the whole system. Right, that the whole research or sort of review system, I meant to say, it is not ideal of how it is structured, not very efficient, not effective in getting the best research insights published, etc. Right? We know all about this, right? We have written papers about that. So that is quite striking, I think. And in that sense, I think one important skill might actually relearn something that academics of my generation, I think, many have forgotten on their way. And that is that if we want to do research, we actually want to produce new knowledge and not necessarily new publications, right? So this is a very important distinction, I think, because I think the whole system in the last 20, 30 years has been built to encourage publications, no matter what's really inside those publications, right? And if you go like a century back or so, you will see a quite different incentive structure, right? It's about, okay, coming up with something that really is like new knowledge, that really makes a difference. It can still be very, very small, of course, but at least it's not really, there's not so much pressure in, coming up with those many publications that some believe they need. It has become a total game on, metrics that you track and you try to polish, and this is a really stupid game, to be honest.
Of course, yeah, because AI now can write text, and it can summarize papers. It can even generate research ideas. There's a lot that AI can do. And I think, looking at what you said now, before, when you publish a paper, there's a lot of prestige in it. But right now, anybody can publish. Anybody can just go online, generate anything, and then tomorrow it's already in a journal being considered for publication. And I think that, does it look like we've lost that spark in terms of, do you think, have you ever looked at it that way?
So yeah, I think you can maybe explain it with two terms, quantity and quality, right? I think we have been very much become more and more focused on quantity, right? And quantity was the traditional bottleneck in a way, right? How many studies can you feasibly write up in a year? I mean, there of course are those like highly prolific authors which often resort to very strange academic practices, right? But like, what is the number that an average academic can actually produce with studies and everything in a year, right? And while this depends, of course, on the practices of the field, but I think it was a relatively low number, right? Because you needed to do all the stuff yourself, basically. Now with AI, and especially like you've mentioned literature reviews, this of course is like a very weak spot, because you outsource or you don't really have a need, it seems at least, for like data collection and data analysis and those kind of steps, right? So you can go pretty fast into writing mode. At least that's what some people from the literature review community in /AI believe, right? So you jump right into the writing and produce something that looks like a systematic literature review. But essentially it's just some writing, and the data collection probably wasn't very clean, right? So the quantity, that's what I'm saying, I guess, is the quantity now has been very easy to achieve, because you can easily, if you tell me, okay, Dominic, produce 20 papers next year, okay, I can do that. That's not a problem. And if you say 30, I can do that as well. But the problem is, right, pretty shitty papers usually, I guess, right? So that is why I do like initiatives, well, thoughts at least, that are currently being circulated, like limiting the numbers of publications. For instance, say you can only publish one paper per year or one per semester, say. That's a quite interesting thoughts, I believe, because it kind of reforces you to think about, okay, what would be the one paper that is like really high quality and that can have some impact, and you ignore all the other 19 papers that were at best mediocre, but probably, right? So introduce T, and not only in terms of what you put out there, but also in your thinking, right? From the ground up, not being a maximizer of numbers, but rather enhancing the quality that you have in the individual products.
Yeah, true. Because if journals do enforce some of this, even I think there are some journals where an author is only permitted to submit in one issue. I think there was a time I did hear about that, an author, you can't submit multiple papers in a journal, because it kind of raises brows about the quality, through which those papers are being produced. But then, regardless, what do you think it's that one particular thing AI can never replace for somebody who is a great, exceptional researcher?
I think there are quite many attributes that AI cannot replace right now, and I don't see it to be able to replace in the future. I mean, at least not in the very near future. Quite frankly, the list is too long. I think at the moment it is actually very limited in the applications, and most things that we do as academics are not replaceable right now. As I said, when I say academia, this is like everything, right? This is teaching, this is a service. There's a lot of like leadership involved, which I think almost by definition AI cannot really do. Maybe, I mean, it can certainly do management, but leadership is an entirely different thing, and I don't think it will be able to really get into that. And we touched upon values before also, right? That is a tricky thing, I think, for AI to master. And so there are many cultural things that's going on in academic work, and social things that I don't really see happening at the moment. Right now, I think AI in academia is moderately successful because the system was just optimized for a different reality, like what incentives are being given, right? But now, as these incentives are again in the focus and are being discussed and revised, are they actually meaningful? And I think most academics are coming to the conclusion, no, they are actually not, right? They're focused on quantities. Let's find something else. I think once this medium has been found, AI will not have that much impact anymore, right? It's just really this transitional period where you can have some easy wins, but I don't think that these easy wins will actually, substantiate your career or anything. It will not be like the building blocks on which you can build your academic career. I don't see that happening. So I think it really comes down to that kind of quality thinking, right? Quality in your thoughts, which often, by the way, require writing as a thinking process, right? So there's no easy way to outsource writing yourself, at least. So that is of essence, I think. And then all the other skills that I've mentioned, like we are conversing with others. That is, AI is not at a place yet to come up with something really novel, right? Like at least novel in terms of not just connecting dots that have not been connected before, but coming up with some really different thing.
Of course, yeah. If we can't really, and I believe we have much more role to play in terms of the output and all of that, and that's what really makes us exceptional. So, Dominic, you are a professor of methods of work psychology, and I'm going to ask you this question: if you were mentoring a PhD student today, let's say starting today, what is that one thing you're going to tell the PhD student not to do? What's that one mistake you want them to avoid, particularly in the next 5 years?
So I recently had a discussion with one of my professorial colleagues where it was about a specific situation, actually, of a PhD that I'm currently mentoring also. And the discussion was a bit like, my colleague is like, for me, like the role model of the quantity system. Like, he's super successful in what he's doing, highly published, like all the metrics are great, okay? And so he wanted to impose that kind of view on the PhD student, basically saying, okay, look, what you need to do is publish, right? And publish high impact, etc. And I'm just not convinced that this is actually the right thing to do, because there are some weak signals, I would say, of at least that the system is kind of problematic, and it might not actually result into the knowledge that we need as a society, but rather it results in publications that no one reads. So I would actually try to reinstall or re-implement the thought of personal agency, of what I call like also just academic freedom, right? Which is a term, of course, but a term that I think is sometimes misunderstood, in terms that if you check on social media, I find it very interesting that people complain a lot about academic positions and how little they're maybe paying, or how insecure they are, especially teaching positions, etc. But when I look back on my life, actually teaching positions, like, just contracts, have been really a building block for my own financial independence, because I approached it with a different mindset, I believe. I approached it in a way of, okay, I really want to kind of build almost like build a business on being a good teacher. So I've won and as I've won those awards, institutions came to me basically to apply whether I could teach for their institution, etc. And I did this all like next to my main career. So this was like really giving me a lot of flexibility, because I was like financially independent. I didn't need to follow a specific position. I didn't need to accept any position. I could just for the right position to appear. And this is something what I strongly believe you will not get if you play the publication game, and only that game. Because if you just follow the publications, as we have discussed before, you basically need to wait until there's this right position in front of you. And that can be problematic because cultural practices like national cultures diverge here a bit, but in instance, I think it's very difficult because sometimes the positions are like very specific, right? So they tell, oh, there's a professorship for terminology in the 17th century, right? I'm exaggerating a bit, but the point is that often I have the feeling like, okay, there are not many people worldwide that actually are an expert in this topic. Okay, so if this isn't you, you're kind of out of the game, right? Other universities and academic contexts are a bit more flexible, but yes, in general, you need to wait until the position is there. So what I would encourage is to build something, a resource that gives you that academic freedom. This can be anything, right? This can be just becoming very good at grant writing, for instance. That I think has been another lever for me. Just being good at getting money, getting funded, because this allows me, of course, to broaden my research perspective. I can say what I do research on, and not necessarily the position that I'm applying for. So this is a totally different logic, and I feel like many early career academics do not really think enough about this option. But as I said, it can also be about teaching. It can be about just doing something on the side that is kind of compatible with your academic interests, right? Whatever it is, just do something that is useful for your academic career and broadens you, gives you like the security that you need to have really a career that you want, and not something that is like that you're being pushed into, right? That would be my advice, I think.
The reason why it kind of seems very, this is a very massive point that you made here, because when you look at early career researchers and a lot of people, you see that so many people, because they don't have that opportunity to the right funding, they compromise their career. So they end up doing things, outsourcing their time for things that don't really look like where they are going to, but because they sometimes they kind of trade their time for money, just to sustain themselves. And this is a very dangerous, very bad position, particularly for, early career researchers, particularly when you look at the African context, because that is just some of the way out. And also even teachers too. There's so many staff, in the institution, academic staff, who they're not getting the right information. So what they do is that either they are into salami publishing, or maybe they continue to engage in the publication game, and then maybe doing all sort of things that might not really be a reflection of where they truly want to be, looking at the research interests that they better for themselves. And that is why, if they don't get the right sensitization, if they don't have the right mindset, they can't really bring their ideas to fruition. Because from what the last thing you mentioned here now, the reason why it lets you explore your ideas is because you don't have that, you have that freedom because of how much you've explored and some of the areas that you've tried to engage yourself in. So that kind of gives you freedom to now explore your ideas rather than doing something that you're mandated to do. So that's why it's actually really a very massive point. I believe that it's going to be really helpful for not just early career researchers, but also researchers too, who are long-term in their field. Because there are so many people who are not early career, in quotes now, but they still need interventions like the early career researchers as well. I don't know if you understood what I said.
Yeah. I just had one kind of unrelated thought, but I just want to share it also, because so what it's for is like that there's this limitation maybe in your academic freedom that is exposed by the context, right? Because the context kind of wants you to go maybe towards professorship or whatever, and that has a clear path towards it. But I think there's also another limitation, and that is inside your head in terms of maybe having research interest and then being very, your ego defending that research interest quite heavily, and you want to stick to it at all costs, basically, right? And that also might not be the best path, right? So being very open, really. I sometimes really see this, like with, researchers, especially maybe when they are tenured, right? They're sometimes researching something and people are, well, is this like really really super important. Do we really need this? And it's like their speciality, and they just focus on this, and they're like maybe an expert worldwide on this, but maybe they're the global expert because no one else really cares about this, And this is, it's a difficult thing. We need this kind of people as well, right? And we need to have the freedom to research what we think is good, because this is how the academic system works. In the end, we don't have a clear input-output logic or something. But what I'm saying is maybe don't have this as a PhD already. Like, be a bit more flexible in what's really interesting, and also reflect on your interests, because sometimes you just stumble into a topic, and then if you tell yourself often enough that you're in this field because it's interesting, then you might believe it, right? But it might actually just be chance that you ended up in a specific domain, and there's maybe no need to defend it, right? You can just also let it go somewhere else, and take whatever you have learned in the previous field with you to change the new field. I think that is actually much more interesting, and there's also a lot of academic evidence about this, that those spillover effects from one field to the other. This is where true knowledge is often generated. So be that kind of beacon that brings the knowledge from one domain to the other, instead of just sitting in your domain and try to improve it very, very incrementally.
True, Dominic. This is something I can relate to, because personally, after my MSc focused on antimicrobial resistance, and then in my PhD, I wanted to do something on NTDs, deep learning for neglected tropical diseases. That's identification of skin manifesting images. And then my one tutor was telling me then that, okay, no, that I should go and continue with what I did in my MSc and all of that, so that it will align and all of that. But then they don't want you to understand where you, like, the areas where you are kind of developing some passion, because I kind of had strong affinity for machine learning and deep learning. So when I saw the idea, I was like, no. I want to do what I am passionate about, what I can spend hours doing, and not just something somebody has mandated me to go and explore, and then I'm exploring it for them, or because this is what they want us to do. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes I would also want to just add something, if you're going to just highlight some of the roles of academic mentorship, particularly in how it shapes the career, output of some researchers. Because sometimes, from what you're saying, you did mention about some other colleague, who they were telling about focusing on publication output and all of that. So don't you think if researchers don't have the right mentorship, even the mentorship that they presume to be entering into can also be detrimental to their career? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that we indeed usually do not get very good advice when we grow up as academics, so to speak, right? I really think there is a limitation, and I think there are also, like, you can trace it back to how professors, for instance, are being hired, right? They're hired for the research usually, and all the other criterions are not that important. So they don't need to be good teachers. They don't need to be good leaders. And that, of course, is a bit of a problem if you then want people to actually learn from you. So this is a structural thing. You need the person to give you the doctorate at the end, but for all other purposes, you can just find someone on your own. And this is, I think, an advantage of the academic community, because usually this community is very open, right? So if there's this one important person 2 continents far away, you just message that person, and usually they are quite happy to just have a conversation or whatever, right? So I think use that potential. Don't focus on like those formal structures, those formal networks that you're part of, but build your own network through just, informally reaching out, spending times at conferences, drinking coffee, not going to the actual talks, right? They are usually not that great. Stay in the corridors, talk to people. This is like the essence of how you make a good conference. And this is like the mindset that you also need for the rest of your academic career, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dominic. Imagine a young researcher is watching this conversation from an LMIC context. Now, a lot of things that we've discussed right now probably might be attributed to maybe PhD students or maybe individuals who are already in the academic world, thinking of how to explore artificial intelligence tools and all of that. But now let's think about somebody who is yet to start. They've seen Dominic's career. They've seen how magnificent your career trajectory has been. And what is one message that you're going to have for them, particularly when they watch this conversation?
So I think it's probably the notion of academic freedom, right? So when you look at, I'm not now talking about careers or lives in general. Yeah, freedom is something that is really interesting to not only pursue in a general sense, but to have actually academia as one whole field, one whole domain, where this value of freedom is at least present. And you can make use of it if you plan for it, right? It's not a given thing for everyone, I guess. You can work towards it because it's basically inbuilt in the system. So I think that is something that is quite attractive. So that I think would be one thing that attract people to watch this conversation, because I think this is like really the first thing that you need to think about, like how to actually go from. As I said, it's not really just handed out, and there are many systematic things that work against it, unfortunately. But I know if you have a strategy, and there are good role models out there as well, if you just follow their lead, reflect yourself of what freedom means to you, I think this is something that is achievable much more easier, and its achievement is much more likely than with other types of careers.
Completely. I think that's very important, because a lot of people wouldn't really understand. Some people might not really understand what you've just said now, because they don't understand why freedom is something that is quite very important. And I believe if you're somebody who is listening to this, freedom is important, because the whole idea of exploring your creativity is that you're free. Because when you are locked in, chasing the wrong goal as an early career researcher, you might kind of spend years, a very significant amount of your time doing the wrong thing. And that is because you lack that security. I'm going to use that word. That was security, to get where you should be, because then at the end of the day, you're tied down. So I think this is really a very massive point. Getting that freedom. Freedom is something that is really very important too. So that's kind of the fundamentals, and every other thing is now definitely going to come. You see ideas flowing, your ability to now explore what you have in mind, because you're free. And that is one of the that is something that is really very phenomenal. I want to really thank you so much, Dominic, for your time. And I just want to say, if there's any last thing you have in mind to share, any other thing that you have in mind to share.
I just want to leave you maybe with a quick metaphor or something, if that's okay. Something that I've kind of I've used for a long time, but now since we're ending on the note of academic freedom, I also see it in a different lens. And that is when I'm coaching doctoral students, often they have very high ideas of what they do, etc. And I usually say, no, it's, a doctorate is like a driving license. You need it to play in the game of academia, basically. That's a requirement. But it doesn't need to be fancy, right? It's better you have it quickly in your pocket, and then you can start learning on your own, as you would with driving a car, right? But so this is a metaphor that I've used for years. But now with this notion of academic freedom, I actually think it actually also transfers well to the rest of your career, because you want to stay in the driver's seat, right? You don't want to be in an autonomous vehicle AI, right, to drive you somewhere where you don't want to go. You don't want to be on a road that only allows you to go to a certain destination, like a professorship or something, right? So get a driver's license and then make use of it. Stay in the driver's seat and drive where you really want to go. That would be my last advice.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for that. Like, I'm just going to really commend you, and thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have you again on this particular show, where you share much more deeper insight. I want to say a very big thank you once more for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for having me. Take care.
I hope you're catching up with the World Cup.
Yeah, I am, and now like the next weeks I will be spending in Spain, so I have have some better chances in being in the country that actually wins. So
yeah, sure. Of course, hopefully Portugal wins. Okay, all right. Okay, good.